¿Qué pasó, amigos? Bienvenidos de regreso a su podcast favorito, La Nación. El día de hoy en este episodio, como podrán ver, es un episodio muy diferente. No está el Rafa conmigo, tenemos un invitado muy especial, pero pues antes de empezar ya saben qué hacer. Denle like al video, suscríbanse al canal, comenten todo lo que les deje dudas el video para resolverlo en el siguiente. Y pues así, sin más preámbulos, nomás les quiero avisar que este episodio va a ser en inglés. Va a tener subtítulos, así es, va a ser el primer episodio en inglés. ¿Por qué? Porque nuestro invitado pues nomás habla inglés, así que lo vamos a hacer todo en inglés, pero va a tener todos subtítulos aquí abajo, que no les dé flojera leer. Va a ser un episodio muy interesante, es el encargado de SoxProspects, entonces es una de las personas más conocedoras de las granjas de Boston, de todos los prospectos, de Marcelo Mayer, Cedanne Rafaela, Nico Cavadas, todas esas dudas vamos a resolverlas ahorita. Y pues sí, como les digo, va a ser en inglés, así que pues ni modo a leer los subtítulos. Así que pues ya aquí voy a empezar con Chris. Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Buenas noches. Y lo siento, pero no hablo un poquito de español. No me recuerdo mucho de mis 4 años en escuela.
That's actually good. That's actually very good.
Well, thank you. I'm
surprised.
I'm trying. I would love it if I were conversant, just because, especially back when we used to do more interviews, it really would have been useful to have enough to be conversant in it. But I appreciate you doing this with the subtitles, and thank you all for listening through and bearing with me.
This is actually something that we've been waiting on doing. Well, we talk about prospects on our first season. This is actually, we could say that we're about to begin our 3rd season from the podcast. And It was actually interesting. People liked it. So I wanted to take it like to the next level. Sadly, Rafael, who is the guy who makes the podcast with me, he doesn't really speak that much English. So I'm here all by myself. But man, just a pleasure to have you and, well, talk baseball.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, maybe next time we'll get Rafael on, and I'll do my best. From what I picked up from that intro, I caught some you saying good things about us, and I appreciate that. But
actually, what I was saying, you're the main guy from SoxProspects, right?
So there's actually a team of us. Some of us are more kind of public facing than others. I'm the executive editor. We have a team of 4 guys that are the ownership that run the site. We were started by a guy named Mike Andrews back in 2003. He just kind of started the website as a passion project. For anyone who subscribed to The Athletic, actually, Jen McCaffrey wrote a great article about us, I think a couple years back, talking about how the site started and that sort of thing. And, he started it kind of as a pet project, and it really just grew by leaps and bounds beyond that. There were, we added a news page, we added scouting reports, there were always rankings, but now it's him. He's the editor-in-chief. Myself, I'm the executive editor. Ian Kundle, who is our director of scouting, and James Dunn, who I think is a managing editor. I don't remember his title specifically, but we're the 4 guys who are the ownership. And then we've got a whole team of writers and web editors and social media folks who just do a terrific job. And we've had a great team of folks through the years, really, that have helped us to kind of get to where we are. And we kind of take it as a point of pride that, John Mioli, who covered the Baltimore Orioles for The Sun for a while, Tim Healy, who currently covers the Mets for Newsday, came through our ranks as writers and moved on to bigger and better things. And that's kind of one of the things I'm proudest of, honestly, with the site. So it's been a passion project of ours for a while. But yeah, it's a team of us who do it. It's just some of us kind of have more of a public profile than others.
So right now, how many people is involved in the whole SoxProspects movement?
We've probably got a team of about 20 or so people, I would say, but who do different things. So there are some folks who just kind of help update the website, on a daily basis with stats and things. And we've got a team of writers who will write, every day on our news page. We have a cup of coffee where it recaps the prior night's games, and we have a weekly notes column. Our writers do that. We have writers and editors, I should say, who handle the news page. Ian and myself mostly handle the scouting reports. Mike will chip in with some stuff once in a while. James will go to games. And we have contributors who once in a while will contribute something to the website. Chris Clegg is a guy who started writing some stuff for us last year from Greenville. It kind of ebbs and flows depending on what we need at a given time. We have a couple of social media folks who just handle our social media accounts. So yeah, I'd say we're probably around 20 or so right now.
Yeah. Well, I do see in the website right here that in the legal section, it says 2023. Was that the year all started?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. If I remember the story right, I think Mike, when he started the site, I think he was doing it while he was on his honeymoon, believe it or not, which I kind of was like, dude, what are you doing? You're on your honeymoon. You should be go spend time with your wife. What's wrong with you? But I met him shortly after, and it's kind of funny. So it was either 3 or 4, 2003 or 2004. If it says 3 on the site, then that's it. I joined the site in 2005 where, believe it or not, so I was playing a video game called MVP Baseball that anyone who had a GameCube or might be OG PlayStation or maybe PlayStation 2 at the time.
The Manny Ramirez one.
Yes, precisely. Manny was on the cover of it.
Great game.
Awesome game. And it was one of the first games that had editable minor leaguers. And so you had, because the minor leaguers aren't in the union, so they couldn't put minor leaguers who weren't in the union in the game. But what they did is they would fill out, I think they went down to high A. You had 3 minor league teams, and they were these players who you could edit. And so you could change the name, change the statistics to a certain point. And I was trying to find a website that had all the Red Sox minor leaguers because I wanted to change them myself, because this was before. Now with the show, you can download rosters someone makes, right? Or at least the last time I played the show, you could. So I was doing it myself, and I found the website and I emailed Mike. And for some reason, when I emailed him, I signed it Chris Hatfield, Salem, New Hampshire, which is where I'm from. And I don't know why, who puts that on an email? I don't know. It was weird. And it turns out Mike grew up about a mile from my house. And we just we were like too far apart in age to have known each other in school, but we grew up, we're one kind of generation removed. So like the people who were the seniors when I was in high school were the freshmen when he was in high school. So we just kind of met each other that way. I started to try and pursue a career in journalism. Right around that time, we got a news page on the site, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to get clips. Why don't I write for you? And that kind of just grew from there, where I took a bigger and bigger role, became one of the owners when he kind of offered to have some other guys join ownership. Chris Mellon was our first director of scouting. He went on to be one of the head prospect guys at Baseball Prospectus for a while. And then, we've had some other people come through ownership. Mioli was one of them as well. And now there's 5 of us who run it. But yeah, it's really kind of grown by leaps and bounds. And it's cool when folks who've helped us along the way, like Peter Gammons read the site. And that was one of our first, holy crap, Peter Gammons knows who we are. We go down to spring training and I say hi to the media guys, the front office people know who we are, because I think it's because we've been able to build a reputation through the years of we're going to do a good job, do an objective job, be fair. We're going to be giving praise and talking great about guys when it's warranted. And we're going to, give criticism when it's warranted too. And I think the front office is okay with that. And they know we're going to do things the right way. So we've been lucky enough we've had Chaim Bloom on our podcast.
Yeah.
We've had, like Eddie Romero, Ben Crockett, Mike Rickard, Paul Taboni, Brian Abraham. We've had players on the podcast, although for some reason, I guess folks weren't as into it when we used to get players. So that's why I was like, look, I'm willing to go to games early to get interviews, but if y'all don't want to listen to it, I'm not going to go 5 hours early to talk to a guy before a game. And the feedback was kind of like, yeah, we don't care. We want the analysis. Okay, cool. So I keep thinking maybe someday I'll get maybe the top guy or something on there. I'm sure if we got Mayer on or something, people would want to listen, but at any rate, yeah. So it's grown a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's been a while for sure, because you guys describe yourself on social media as the main resource for prospects information from the Red Sox, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've definitely accomplished that. You have a whole website, like you say, 20 people. That's a great team. That kind of explains the whole work that you do, guys, because it's literally a lot.
It takes a village, for sure.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Next, I wanted to ask you, you said that one of your guys has wrote for The Athletic, something like that, or they wrote about you?
They wrote about us, yeah. So Jen McCaffrey, who's one of the Red Sox beat writers for The Athletic, wrote a piece, and I can shoot you an email if you want to link to it or something. I don't know off the top of my head, but I want to say it was back in 2001, perhaps, I want to say, or somewhere between 19 and 2000. Sorry, not 2001, 2021. That would make much more sense. Yeah, 2021 or so. Short an article about the start of the website and that sort of thing. And like I know, like the Union Leader wrote something about us once. That's the New Hampshire newspaper. And like we've had to relationships with folks in media, like in the newspapers and radio, who've we've done interviews with too. But we used to write a monthly piece for ESPN Boston for a while, so that was one thing we did that kind of got our name out there too, I think. So yeah, we've been lucky to develop some really good relationships with some of the media folks on the Red Sox beat. And that's kind of paid off and kind of getting our name out there, I think.
Yeah, it sure has worked. Have you worked with MLB, like maybe with MLB Pipeline or something like that?
We haven't worked with them. We've had Jim Callis on our podcast probably about 7 or 8 times at this point, dating back to when he was at Baseball America and now where he's at MLB Pipeline. So I think, the way we both kind of look at it is, because we were talking about this in our podcast episode this week of, when someone else comes out with a list, we don't necessarily want to compare ours to theirs. If you want to know what we think of theirs, go look at ours, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's what we think. And, we'll agree to disagree on stuff. We're not going to have the exact same rankings, but, we've had him on because he has really good insights and stuff like that, but they do a great job over there. They're covering all 30 teams. And I think that goes to why we consider ourselves, if I can, toot our own horn a little bit, we consider ourselves the best resource for the Red Sox farm system because we can focus on one team.
Exactly.
And
that's why when we talk prospects in our podcast, I always use your rankings instead of the MLB pipelines because, well, you are like focusing on only one team. So I think it should be like a better analysis, something like more accurate. And I like that actually.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's the national guys like MLB Pipeline, Baseball America, Fangraphs, ESPN, The Athletic, they're folks, they got to cover 30 teams. But then you look at like the Red Sox beat writers, they're busy covering Fenway. Like Alex Spear from the Globe does Baseball America's list, but he's got to cover the major league team at Fenway. So he doesn't have as much time to focus on the minors. So it's not a knock on anyone. They all do great work. It's just that we have the luxury of being a little more narrow in our focus.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the whole prospecting. Because it was actually not that interesting for like what can you call it? Like your average fan, because the Red Sox were not like that kind of team that developed prospects and stuff like that. But with the arrival of Bloom, it had definitely changed a lot. Like we're trading our star guys for guys that we're going to see playing 3, 4, 5 years. Some will pan out, some will not. But if something has Bloom done for the fan base is grow that interest in prospects for all of us.
I think so. To somebody, it's certainly been a focus since he came in. And I think that he's kind of addressed that. One thing he really felt when he came in was that the organization was not set up for sustainable success. Where if you look at a team like I think the Dodgers are kind of the gold standard for this of, the major league team is great, but they also have a stacked farm system, right? Such that they can even do things like trade for Trey Turner and Max Scherzer, give up a lot of really good prospects and still have a really good farm system.
Yeah. I was actually shocked that they didn't trade anybody in the past trade deadline.
Yeah.
I mean, they were getting a pitcher for sure.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where I guess there's a point at which you kind of have to roll with what you've got. Theo Epstein used to say when he was the GM, you have to fight the impulse to build a perfect team. Right. Because you don't necessarily need a team that's going to win 120, 130 games. You need a team that's going to make the playoffs. And then from the playoffs, just compete because you never know what will happen in a 5-game or 7-game series. So I think that's kind of why you don't necessarily want to just push all your chips in a given year.
Yeah. I was talking about the Dodgers because they have great farm system. I thought they were getting a pitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, but talking about the Red Sox, we can talk about the trades that Bloom has made.
Sure.
there's different ones, which most of the people hate. At least here in the Latino community, I know in the US, maybe kind of different. But with us, everyone hates Bloom, almost everyone. And actually, there's like right now, no in between. Like most people either love it or hate it. I gotta say, I kind of like the guy. I like his work, but most of our followers do hate him.
He's polarizing. He's been polarizing. I think part of that is, look, it's never going to be popular when one of the first things you do is trade Mookie Betts.
That's right.
Right. And I think he knew that was coming. This offseason, losing another star in Xander Bogaerts. So I do think, they were trying to re-sign. I think they could have handled the process better. But, I don't think anyone's going to fault them for not matching the Padres offer. But I think the point is you don't let it get to that stage, right? You lock them up sooner. Exactly. That's not going to make you a popular guy, especially when 2 of your 3 years you finished in last place, right?
Although this year was a very injury-prone year, like I'm not putting it all on Bloom.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for they could have handled the trade deadline better. I think the fact that all they needed to do at the trade deadline, for example, to get under the competitive balance tax, is trade JD Martinez, right? And they kind of did this half in, half out. We're trading Christian Vasquez, but we're also going to acquire guys at the deadline and Tommy Pham, and
it was weird. Definitely,
it was confusing to the clubhouse, I think, and it sent a confusing message, and especially not getting under the CBT, which I don't care about the money they pay in tax. It's not a lot. But now when Eovaldi and Bogaerts sign elsewhere, the picks they got in return were in the 130s. Whereas had they gotten under the tax, the picks would have been around 70s.
Yeah.
And you're talking about an extra $1 million in draft cap space. So that's now affecting your on-field team and what you can acquire in the draft. And so it just really wasn't a wise thing to go half in, half out like that. I think they would maybe take a different tack, at the deadline if they could. But at the same time, they thought they were going to get Chris Sale back. They thought they were going to have Nathan Eovaldi the whole stretch run. They didn't realize, I think Trevor Story was on his way back or something. Yeah. So things did go a little south on them. But at the same time, you can't count on those guys to come back necessarily either, I think. So there are things they could have done better. And I think that's why some people are focusing on that. Some people will focus on the good things that Bloom's done too. I mean, he's made some really shrewd moves as well, picking up John Schreiber on waivers, picking up Christian Arroyo on a waiver claim, picking up Garrett Whitlock in a Rule 5 draft. They've done a good job of finding different ways to supplement the roster. I just think now it needs to pay off at the major league level. And so I think this year and next year are going to be really, where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, next year is the one I'm looking a lot forward. But before we get to that, let's talk about the Mookie Betts trade.
Okay.
Probably everyone hated it. Then, like 1 month after the trade, we were able to see the bigger picture, and we're like, okay, it was not that bad of a trade. But now Jeter down was just the fade, so that sucks.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Jeter Downs part not hitting is not great, right? That's a trade. If you're going to move a superstar like Mookie Betts, you need to get a good return on the trade. I think what Bloom would say is, and look, at the time, Verdugo was, and for some reason people forget about the Verdugo piece. And look, Verdugo is not Mookie Betts. He was not acquired to be Mookie Betts. But Verdugo is a major league regular starting outfielder, which that has value. I think this past year, I think his brother said on Twitter recently that he was playing through an injury for a lot of last year. I don't know if that's true or not. I think Verdugo has played out roughly to about what you would have hoped. Connor Wong looks like he might be a major league backup or a major league platoon catcher. That's got value, and that's about what he was valued at the time. I think the Downs piece not really playing out well and not really paying off is not the best outcome you would have hoped for. It's disappointing, but it's, look, you can't necessarily predict how a guy is going to play out at the major league level. maybe, they had this lost COVID season in 2020. You never know how that's going to play out for any player, right? For Downs, it looks like it didn't play out great. They have other guys in the system who, if not for the COVID year, probably wouldn't be as good as they are. Brandon Walter is a pitcher who I think really remade himself during the COVID year and came back a different pitcher in 2021. But as far as Downs not hitting, it's disappointing. I wonder how much there's an argument to be made that maybe they pushed him a little aggressively. He really didn't get a lot of time in Double-A in 2019. Maybe they could have brought him along a little slower. That said, I think he just kind of, every player reacts to failure differently. And you never know, look, failure in the minor leagues isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I'd rather a guy react to failure in the minors than in the majors. I don't want the majors to be the first time a guy doesn't hit well or struggles. Yeah. So I don't know if it was just not being able to respond to that well, or just not being able to make the adjustments. It happens, man. There have been plenty of guys through the years that, acquired in trades, drafted, signed, whatever, who they reach AAA or they reach the majors and some kind of flaw gets exposed that you didn't see coming. He's not the first. He won't be the last. It's disappointing, but it is what it is. I think you just chalk it up to, the thing you got to keep in mind is Betts made it clear he was going to, test the free agent market. And I think Bloom felt it was important not to lose Mookie Betts for nothing or just for a compensation draft pick. Then COVID hits and he signs the extension. And I think the pandemic really changed Betts' outlook on an extension.
I think that too. We've talked about it. I believe he wouldn't sign the extension if it wasn't for COVID.
No question. I agree.
Think he would. Yeah. So maybe who could have knew, right? But if he wasn't traded, maybe then he signed the extension with the Sox.
Yeah, hindsight being 2020, maybe he would have. But I think the other thing the Red Sox or Bloom would tell you is that they didn't feel that the organization was in a position to compete early in the contract, right? So the way it's played out, 2 of the last 3 years, they finished in last place.
Yeah.
And I think they felt that, look at 2020. In 2020, having Mookie Betts on the team wouldn't have moved the needle at all. They wouldn't have been they wouldn't have been a different team. Maybe in 2021, it would have helped.
Who knows? Sure. Because paying him that much money and also paying still the full David Price contract.
Exactly.
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? Yes, who knows? There's also the Hunter Renfroe trade. This one, I love it. I love it because most of our followers hated the Renfroe signing. They said he was a bad, he's not good. And then when they trade him, they all hate Bloom for trading him. So I just laugh at it. But yeah, this trade was also a weird one, getting Jackie Bradley, but also 2 prospects who I don't know if they're panning out like we were hoping. David Hamilton, who can share still up a lot of bags, and Binelas, who isn't really having that much fun in the minors.
He struggled in Double-A. I mean, Binelas was okay in Greenville. After the promotion, he struggled in Double-A, which the thing with the minor leagues right now, with the loss of short season, so for folks who remember the Lowell Spinners being the short season A affiliate, that level's gone now. And so each level of the minors has kind of expanded a bit into the terms of the talent level. So low A right now, which is the level the Salem Red Sox are in, the talent level is kind of equivalent to what the level the Spinners used to be. And so the high A level is a little worse, Double-A. So the jumps between levels are greater.
Bigger.
Now it's tougher to move from level to level. And we saw a lot of guys hit Double-A last year who were doing pretty well in Greenville and really struggle. Binelas was one. Nick Northcutt, who was a guy that they traded, did. Nico Cavadas was another guy who made it to Double-A and really struggled. And it's just, that's when you're the first time you're seeing pitchers who can really spin a breaking ball, who can locate a fastball in the zone, out of the zone to get you to swing and miss at it. And I think for hitters, that's really kind of an important test in coming up the ladder. Now, that said, as far as the trade goes, it could have worked out better. I think it would not look as bad. To me, the problem with the Renfroe trade was not necessarily the trade itself, because Renfroe then this year, it's not, I think the Brewer, I can't even remember right now because this offseason's been so long, but I think the Brewers non-tendered him.
They trade him to the Angels.
Oh, they traded him. Thank you. That's right. Yeah. So he's been moving around. It's one of those guys where, we like Hunter Renfroe for $3 million. We don't like Hunter Renfroe for $6 million. We like Hunter Renfroe for $6 million. We don't like him for $9 million.
Yeah.
And so I think the problem last year was they didn't get a starting right fielder to replace him, and they went with Jackie Bradley, which went poorly, which was very predictable. I think, I'll admit to I talked myself into Jackie Bradley by the time the season started, and I regretted it. But
I did.
I think that was the cardinal sin of that trade, was not getting someone to replace his production. And I think that's another one that they would probably like back if they could do it again.
I think they really thought that they were signing Seiya Suzuki. I think that they thought they were close.
Maybe. I mean, clearly they were interested in him. With everything we've heard this offseason about Yoshida, I kind of wonder if Yoshida was the guy they really had their eyes on more. But the fit for Suzuki seemed perfect. I remember that too. Yeah, I think it just didn't work out, and I just don't know. I think they tried to pivot and just couldn't find anything that they liked. The one thing that Bloom has made clear is he's not going to overpay just to fill a hole in the roster.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference between him and Dave Dombrowski in their approach to roster construction, because Dombrowski, okay, we need a blank. We need an ace. Okay, let's go check in with the White Sox. White Sox, what is the cost to acquire Chris Sale? It is this. Okay, and we'll negotiate that a bit, right? Okay, yeah, you want, Moncada, sure. Not Benintendi, Kopech, sure. Devers, no. We're not including Devers. You want Luis Alexander Basabe? Sure. Okay, you want Mata? No, we're not trading Mata. So that, he'll do that. But like, Bloom, I think, approaching the same thing, would say, no, you want too much for Chris Sale. We're willing to go to X and no further. So I think it's two very different approaches to roster construction. I think that fans who were used to the Dave Dombrowski model have had a hard time adjusting to the Chaim Bloom model.
Very hard time.
That's a big piece of why I think he's been very polarizing.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the Christian Vasquez trade. I think this is the winner. I think this is a good one. I think we definitely got some good return. What can you tell on that one?
So, they got two guys back from the Astros in Emmanuel Valdez and Wilyer Abreu. Valdez is a guy who looks like he can hit. He hit pretty well in AAA last year. There's some question as to what position he plays in the majors. So that's something we're going to have our eye on this year when he starts the year in Worcester. Abreu, solid year in AA last year, can play the outfield. I'm curious about how the hit tool comes along. The thing you got to remember is, there's some people who are like, oh, you traded Vasquez for two guys who aren't even in your, top 15. I think we've got Valdez around 15 to 17.
17, yeah.
Yeah, 17. And I think we've got Abreu at 24. The thing you got to remember is you're not going to get a lot for 2 months of Christian Vasquez.
Yeah, that's right.
You're just not. And that's the same thing with, people will point to the Mitch Moreland trade, where the Red Sox got Jason Rosario and Hudson Potts, who neither of them panned out. Again, what did you expect to get for 1 month of Mitch Moreland in 2020? Right? So they're getting what they can. They thought it was a good enough return to move him. And I think it was a good return for what they had. Are either of those guys, I don't know that I project either of them for a full-time role, but could they be major leaguers? Absolutely. Could they provide good return on the trade? I think so. So we'll see. It'll be our first chance to see them in camp this year. And those are two guys I'm going to really have my eye on. Although they're probably both going to still be in major league camp when we're there, because we're going to be there over like the St. Patrick's Day weekend. That's going to be the first weekend of minor league games, probably based on past history. And it depends who's back from the World Baseball Classic. We were talking before we started recording about it. They're going to have more guys up in major league camp because of the fact that they're going to have so many guys gone. Kike Hernandez, Rafael Devers, Masataka Yoshida, Alex Verdugo, Jarren Duran. All those guys are going to be gone playing in the World Baseball Classic. Maybe some of them will be back by that point when their teams are eliminated, but they're going to be a little thin. So some guys are still going to be up. So I'm hoping some of them come down so we can see them, or otherwise we're going to have to go to more major league games than we usually do.
The last trade I want to talk about, and the one that I do hate, like I can tolerate the Mookie Betts, the Renfroe trade. I hate the Jeffrey Springs trade. I hate that one. I hate it. I hate
In
it.
hindsight,
Yeah,
sure.
I hate that one.
In hindsight, sure. With what Jeffrey Springs turned into, I mean, we've seen with Tampa what they saw when they acquired him from, I think, the Tigers, right? Like they saw something there they liked. The thing you got to remember is at the time they traded, so I think it was Springs and Chris Mazza for Ronaldo Hernandez and I think Nick Sogard. Hernandez has not quite panned out, but at the time it looked like a really good trade.
Yeah.
After the 2020 season, none of us, even if now we don't love the trade, are you going to tell me that at the time you were like, how pounding the table, how can you trade Jeffrey Springs?
No, I mean, I really didn't knew Ronaldo Hernandez, so I was like, okay, if they did it,
sure.
Well, yeah, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah, the thing with Hernandez, he's got all kinds of pop. He can hit the ball really hard. He's got a great arm. The questions are fielding the position at catcher otherwise. And, maybe when they go to an automated strike zone, that will help him a little bit, but he's still just very stiff behind the plate receiving. And the hit tool, whether he'll be able to make contact enough to get to his power, to hit enough home runs, to hit for enough power. There's some question about that. And I think the fact that they designated him for assignment and he cleared waivers this offseason speaks a lot to what teams think of him. And it's not a lot. So, yeah, that's definitely, Bloom will take an L for that one.
Yeah, definitely. To me, that's the biggest L yet.
Yeah. But that said, look, you're not going to win every trade like that, right? There are certainly plenty of moves where over the years where it's like, oh, look, for example, look at the trade with the Phillies where they moved Brandon Workman and Heath Hembry for Nick Pivetta and Connor Seabold. Now Seabold's gone, but I'd do that trade again for just Pivetta without thinking twice, right?
I mean, Hembry wasn't good at all, and Workman, we got him back. So
you're right, and and he wasn't great either after the trade. He absolutely exploded. They got him to be a setup guy, and he just fell apart for him. Yeah. So yeah, it was, and not that you like to see that, but that was certainly, you're going to have trades that turn out that way. You're going to have trades that turn out like the Springs trade. It's just part of the cost of doing business.
Yeah. Also, this reason, the Matt Barnes DFA, that was definitely a surprise.
It was, but I think what they see is, look, it was surprising in part for what they're paying him.
Yeah.
Right. Or, it was $8 million and I think it's $9 million because he got traded. I guess he had an escalator clause of some kind. But anyway, they sent some money to Miami to even out the trade. And I think what that was is, Miami had a spare lefty, the Red Sox had a spare righty, and they matched up on a deal.
Yeah.
It was surprising as a guy that they had for as long as they did. I'm sure that they have very specific reasons based on what they saw from Barnes at the end of last year. Excuse me.
Worry.
I think they probably thought he got a little lucky when he was, he had better stats at the end of last year, but there's some evidence he was getting a little lucky. And I think they just they have said they're in a spot where their 40-man roster is kind of packed tight. And I think what they're finding is there just isn't a ton of interest across the game for guys that they would probably rather move, like Bobby Dahlbeck, maybe even a Jarren Duran, who they have these guys that are kind of in this middle ground of they're not major league regulars, but they're also not guys that you're just going to keep in AAA forever either. They're major leaguers probably at this point. But what are they? We don't know.
Not yet.
I think there's not a whole lot of interest right now. So I'm interested to see what happens in camp, if they may make another surprising trade or not, of a guy like a Dahlbeck or a Duran, if there's interest from another team that maybe has injury issues or something.
Yeah, well, let's see what happened with those guys, but yeah. Right now, before going to talking to prospects, because I do really want to learn a lot about you. I want to learn about these prospects who all I know is only what I read from your website. So I feel like I can learn a lot right now. But right now, I'm going to give you a chance to look good. You've been
Thank you.
like covering the prospects for a while. So if you can tell one prospect that really not everybody, not pipeline, maybe not even your colleagues, nobody or almost nobody liked but you.
Ooh,
and it did pan out.
Did pan out.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So I think how that usually winds up playing out is it's not that a guy makes it to the majors and nobody else knew who he was, right? Because I think there's enough information out there about the minor leagues, about, minor league statistics at least, and that sort of thing, that by the time a guy reaches the major leagues, he has been hyped up enough or written about enough that people know about him. I think the thing that we do really well is we're able to get out and see guys in either spring training or at the affiliates before a lot of other places have, and we're on them earlier, right? So one example I can give you, he hasn't panned out yet, but last year, coming out of the DSL and then last year in spring training, we got really good reports on Miguel Bleis.
Yeah.
Right. And we saw him in camp last year, and it was just loud tools, looks the part. Sometimes you can just tell watching a guy. And I'm sure there are people who might say, well, that's kind of bias seeing a guy in person. I think there's something to be said for seeing a guy in person and seeing just how it looks on the field. So I think we were on him pretty early. We were pushing him last spring as a guy that was probably going to break out this year. And then during the year in the Florida Complex League, we were getting feedback from scouts that he was the best player in the league.
Yeah, you definitely were early on that one.
So we were kind of early on him, I think. Bryan Mata is another guy that we picked up early. In Lowell, I think it was, that we were kind of on him as, hey, this is a guy to keep an eye on. As for guys that made it to the majors, the guys like Devers, they were big bonus guys that everyone knew about. I'm trying to think if there were any sleeper types that we were on that made the majors that people weren't necessarily aware of. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think guys like Mata, who we were on early, Felix Dubront, we might have been on a little early. Generally when guys tended to come through Lowell, we would get on them kind of earlier because we would see them a lot there. So, guys like that, maybe Bogarts, we might have been on a little bit, getting reports from Greenville. So I think it's that kind of, the other thing too is just being able to, see through, back when a lot of people would just kind of scout the box score is what I call it. When you just look at a guy's stat line and a guy would really get pushed up lists because he was putting up good numbers. I think we've been pretty good at seeing through that and just saying, okay, look there, so for example, this past season when Nico Cavadas was putting up great numbers in Salem, I went and saw him. It's like, look, he's doing great. I love his approach. He's got a ton of power. I have concerns about how his swing will work once he gets to AA. And that kind of bore out because that's the kind of thing you can notice when you're going to see guys and getting eyes on them in person and seeing the swing path and things like that. So it works that way as well, but sometimes you just miss too. So I don't want to make it sound like we're perfect either.
Yeah.
I still don't get how Ryan Lavarnway didn't pan out, Darren Cicchini, the list goes on and on of guys I've been plenty wrong on too. So while I appreciate the chance to look good, there have been plenty of times we've been wrong too.
Don't worry, we'll make mistakes, I guess.
All right, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the top 30 because there are a lot of players and I don't want to steal a lot of your time.
No, it's fine.
About the more well-known among here, let's start with your numbers. 26, who Pipeline has at 29, David Hamilton.
Speedy, like you mentioned, broke the Portland Sea Dogs record for stolen bases last year. He was a guy that they, as you mentioned, they got in the Hunter Renfroe trade. Was kind of a surprise addition this year to the 40-man roster. I think a lot of us didn't see it coming. And I think the thinking behind that is the new rules that MLB is putting into place to try and encourage more stolen bases, make the game quicker and more athletic. The fact that pitchers are going to be limited in the number of times they can throw over to first base. The bases themselves are now bigger, which in theory cuts down the distance between the bases. I think that they're it's a hedge for if speed really winds up mattering a lot more in the game, because he's got that. We don't know that he's going to stick at shortstop. He's probably more of a second baseman. I'm interested to see if they try and get him some more time in center field this year. They got him a little bit of time in center field in Portland last year. I'm interested to see if they try him out there a little bit more this year to just give him a little more versatility for a guy who could potentially come up and maybe almost be sort of a Kike Hernandez in the sense that he can play multiple positions. Excuse me. So we'll see how that plays out in AAA this year. But we also have to see how the hit tool works. It's a swing that's designed more for gap to gap hits rather than power. He doesn't have a ton of power, but he just needs to be able to put the ball in play and let his speed play up. And hopefully with the new rules that will, go to his advantage.
Okay. You guys have him making his debut late 2023 here. Do you think that will happen?
It could. It certainly could. He's on the 40-man roster. He's going to be in Worcester. Once you get to Worcester, it's a matter of, what opportunity comes available.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe even an injury and that's it.
It could be. And I mean, and especially if you look at how thin they are up the middle, even before the Story injury, they don't have a lot of guys that can play up the middle right now. And so that could potentially give him an opportunity early.
So with Hamilton also came in the trade Binelas, who you guys don't have in the top 30, but Pipeline does have him in the 22.
Yeah, we've got him at 35. Is where we have him ranked. He's kind of the opposite, where he's got a lot of power. He can drive the ball. Questions about his hit tool, though. He has some swing and miss, especially on velocity, 94 miles per hour and up. He kind of struggled a little bit this year with velocity. So he's going to have to adjust to that and show, in AA this year, he'll go back to AA probably to start the year, whether he can adjust to hitting velocity. I guess he's made adjustments with where he holds his hands in his pre-pitch before he swings. So we'll see how that works. Defensively, he played both first base and third base last year. We think he's more likely to stick at first, maybe play a little bit of third. Maybe he can try and play a little bit of outfield too to make him more versatile. But he's going to have to show a little bit more at the plate to have more of a major league future this year.
So if it's safe to say that if you have to put your money on one of these guys being better at major league, is David Hamilton?
Probably, yeah. I mean, look, they're two very different players, and I think Hamilton is helped by the new rules a lot. It just seems like with Binelas, with the defensive positions he plays, he has to hit more to get an opportunity. Whereas Hamilton, if he can stick at second base, especially now where with the shift rules, you can't shift as much or the same way you could previously, it's going to put more importance on defense at second base, because you can't hide a guy at second base with a lot of shifting. So I think that's going to be, more to Hamilton's advantage potentially compared to Binelas.
Okay. So there's also this guy who you don't have in the top 30, but Pipeline has him 19, Triston Casas.
Yep. We have Casas at 33, so he's just outside of our top 30. Casas had a pretty good year last year, and he's a guy who the Red Sox traded a pitcher named Yohan Ibar, who they had signed as an outfielder, converted to pitching, and was a pretty good reliever. They traded Ibar to Colorado for Casas, pretty much to open a 40-man roster spot back in 2019. Casas had a pretty good year last year in AA. He was pretty consistent for the Sea Dogs. He's pretty good at shortstop, but they also moved him around the diamond. He played some second base. He also got some time in the outfield. In fact, he played in Puerto Rico this offseason for Caguas, which is the team that Ramon Vasquez, the new bench coach, manages down there in Puerto Rico. He played a lot of left field down there. So I think they're grooming him as a potential utility bench player. He's a pretty good guy, a good versatile player. He just doesn't really have any tools that really stand out. It's potential fringe average hit tool, fringe average power. he could play well defensively, but I'm just curious how the bat will play. In Portland last year, he hit 260 with a little bit of power, decent on base. If he continues to improve, maybe his projection will improve. But right now, we've got him a tick behind Hamilton, and we think that's why the Red Sox protected Hamilton, but not Koss.
Yeah, Koss
from the Rule 5 draft.
Makes a lot of sense. 24, Pipeline 21, Wilyer Abreu. You talked a little about him.
Yeah. Abreu is one of the guys, like we mentioned earlier, they got from San Diego, an outfielder who was in Portland after the trade last year. We have him projected right now to go back to Portland to start the year, just because the Worcester outfield looks like it's going to be a little crowded with guys like Greg Allen, Raimel Tapia there. But, in Portland, he didn't look great, but you don't want to judge a guy too much on a small sample following a trade. He hit 242, but, he got on base at a really good clip. He drew 48 walks in 40 games, which is good. But I think we need to see a little bit more from him with the hit tool before we really move him up the rankings that much. So the hit tool is the key thing. The power is pretty good. He can field probably better in a corner outfield spot, but kind of an interesting guy we'll be keeping an eye on, especially in camp, getting a better look at him. But right now, we like Valdez a little bit better for the two guys they got in that trade.
Yeah, I do too. You got a 23, Zach Kelly, who we actually already saw a little.
So 23, Zach Kelly. Yeah.
He's
a guy that we were maybe on a little bit early too. You asked about guys that we were kind of on. We've had him ranked for a little while. He's a player they got as a minor league free agent in 2021. He was just available as a free agent. They went out and got him. They sent him to the alt site to begin 2021 and then had him in Portland. Last year, he moved up to Worcester and made his major league debut. He's got a really good out pitch and the changeup. Potentially, that was one of the best pitches in that Worcester bullpen last year, which was a really good bullpen for AAA. They were really deep in the bullpen last year, but
yeah, they were.
That changeup is really good. The fastball, he's 93 to 96. So that fastball changeup combo makes him a potentially really useful major league reliever. He's going to see plenty of time at Fenway this year.
Okay. 21, Carter Coffey from the past draft, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah. Coffey was one of 3 early picks that the Red Sox had this last year. They drafted him with their pick in the second round. He really struggled after they signed him. He only hit 125 in rookie ball, but he started off and he went like 0 for 20 or something to start his career. But he's a high school kid, right? And then he kind of recovered a little bit. I try not to take statistics right after they draft a player. You have to take it with a really big grain of salt in both directions. You don't want to get too excited if a guy's playing well. You don't want to get too down on a guy if he's not. Coffey will probably wind up at third base. He was a shortstop in high school, but so is everyone that gets drafted that high. He's got a really good arm. He was 94 miles per hour off the mound as a pitcher in high school, so he's got a good arm. He's got above average raw power. There were some questions about his hit tool and how he'll handle advanced pitching in the minor leagues, but we're going to wait and see how he looks this year, whether he goes to Salem to start the year or maybe is in the complex league to start the year. But, they really like him. They gave him $1.85 million. So they're certainly very high on him, but we think he's probably the third best of the guys they got in the draft last year.
Yeah. He was a second though, right?
He was their second pick. Yeah. But they gave Roman Anthony, the guy that they signed after him, more money. And I think that was just kind of a spreading out the bonuses and making sure, by locking in Coffey where they did, having the money to sign Anthony later on. It's kind of a weird way that works out sometimes, but they also have a feel for where guys are going to go sometimes too. And they might've known that a team was in on Coffey and they needed to go get him. Whereas they might've had a better chance of Anthony falling to their next pick.
Yeah. So what you said about everyone is a shortstop coming out of college, that's what we were talking, because a lot of our followers were kind of mad that they were drafting a lot of shortstop. And we were like trying to explain to everybody, like, hey, they're a shortstop right now, but so were many other else, and they're end up in the outfield or something.
What I would suggest, if any of your listeners want to look at something interesting, go look at our list of the international signings through the years. Everybody that they sign in the international free agent classes, like the amateurs, the 16-year-olds, they are all either shortstops, center fielders, or catchers. And then because they're 16 and they're still growing, right? So like I can remember one guy, Danny Diaz, who they gave over $1 million to, who didn't pan out. He didn't make it past the rookie league, but they signed him and he was a shortstop. By the time he made his debut in the Dominican Summer League, he was a third baseman. And by the time he came to the U.S. to play in rookie ball in the U.S., he was a first baseman because he had grown so much. So that's how this works. Look, Dustin Pedroia was a shortstop when they drafted him. Will Middlebrooks was a shortstop when they drafted him. Michael Chavis was a shortstop when they drafted him. All of those guys moved off of shortstop by the time they made Double-A. Never mind the majors. So these things, you got to wait for them to pan out.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to explain, because they were really mad. Like I couldn't understand why. Moving on, all the way to number 16. This guy will like a lot because we have kind of talked a little to him on DM. Brainer Bonassi. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
I think it's Briner Bonassi. I only know
Brainer.
that because we interviewed Eddie Romero and he said it right. We were butcher. We were calling him like Bonacci, like he's a Italian. Yeah. Like, what are we doing? Like after we heard his name, it's like, of course it's not Bonacci. But yeah, Bonassi played in Salem last year in low A. He's a guy who has a really good approach at the plate. He'll take a lot of walks. Good fielder. He played mostly second base last year, but that was mostly because he was on the same team as Marcelo Mayer for a lot of the year. And he was on the same team as another guy we have ranked higher in Edinson Paulino. But Bonassi, you know, a guy they signed out of Venezuela, had really good arm, really confident in it. Probably fits better as a utility infield guy rather than a full-time shortstop, but he can handle shortstop, at least part-time probably. Power probably isn't his strong suit, but if he can get his hit tool to maybe being above average, which is possible, we project him to have about an average hit tool. We think that will really help his projection down the line. So he's an interesting guy to follow in what's going to be a really good, really interesting Greenville infield. One thing to keep an eye on, I think, if the Red Sox need to make a deal for someone at the trade deadline this year, is they are very strong in the middle infield at that level, where to start the year in Greenville, they're probably going to have Marcelo Mayer again, Edinson Paulino again, Briner Bonassi again. It would not surprise me if one of those guys, maybe not Mayer, Meyer's not going anywhere.
None.
But if Paulino and Bonassi are, if one or both of them are having a good year, it would not surprise me to see those be guys that they maybe move at the deadline to get something of value in return.
That's an interesting scoop. On his glove, how good is he?
Bonassi, it's pretty good. He's sorry, as my alarm goes off. He primarily played shortstop, and he's a pretty good shortstop. Like I said, he mostly played second last year, but that if he were the only shortstop on the team, he would be playing shortstop full time. We have him as potential fringe average defense, so a little bit below average. But that said, it's a projection right now. It could be average, maybe a little above, and maybe a little below. Part of it depends on just how his body develops, how his athleticism develops as he moves up.
Okay. Let's go to number 15, one of the people favorite also, Bleis Jordan.
Oh yeah. The internet loves Bleis Jordan.
Yeah.
When we post articles that mention Bleis Jordan in the headline, they always get more clicks. It's really funny.
Yeah.
The internet loves them some Bleis Jordan.
And I mean, who wouldn't, right? He got like a very flashy story.
A lot of power. Great name. Let's start there. His name's Bleis.
That's a fucking great name. Yeah.
It's a great place to start, right? Hits for a ton of power. A guy who you got to keep in mind he's going to be 20 all year this year. So he's young for his draft class. With the hit tool, at the beginning of the year, he was really struggling against velocity. So he was hitting off-speed pitches really well, which was good because that wasn't necessarily something that we knew he could do, but he was really struggling against velocity. As mid-year hit, he started to do better. He got promoted to high A Greenville, and he was doing a lot better against velocity as the season went on. So that was really encouraging to see. So we'll see how that develops this year, where he's going to start the year in Greenville, hoping to get promoted mid-year to Portland. And I think Portland, as I said earlier, is really going to be where he proves where he's at developmentally and how much time he's going to need. Defensively, we like him better at first base than third. He can make the plays. He's just not a natural looking fielder. He's looked better than advertised and sometimes, but it's not fluid. You know, he doesn't have great range for third base, but he has looked pretty good picking balls at first base. You know, we think he'll be able to find a home at first base or third base. And the key thing is going to be, he's got enough power to handle either of those positions easily. He's probably one of the top power hitting prospects in the system. It's probably him, Cavadas, maybe Nathan Hickey. They've got a few guys with some pop, but I think the key thing for him is going to be the hit tool and how that develops. And I'm going to be really interested to see how he does against fastballs this year and how he does after a promotion to Portland, presuming that happens sometime mid-year.
Yeah, it should. Yeah, will you say he ends the season in Double-A?
Probably. He got promoted to Greenville mid-year last year. So if he spends the first half of this year in Greenville, he'll basically have a whole season there. So you would hope by that point he's ready to move up to Portland.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Number 14, this one's an interesting to me because I have read people that say that he's like pretty good, and some others that say he isn't all that. What can you tell me about Matthew Lugo?
Lugo was their second round pick in 2019 out of Puerto Rico. He's Carlos Beltran's nephew, which is kind of interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he actually went to his high school is Carlos Beltran Baseball Academy, actually, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But he had a really good year last year in Greenville. He spent almost the entire year there. He got I think he only moved up to Portland for the playoffs when they needed a middle infielder, or maybe late in the year, like last week or two of the season. But he had a pretty good year. The thing with him is that, again, he's one of these guys where there's really no tool that stands out. You know, potential fringe average hit tool is what we have, average speed, you know, potential fringe average game power, average defense at third base. He's moved off of shortstop. He was playing shortstop for most of the year, and then they eventually moved him to third base, I think in August, shortly before Marcelo Mayer was promoted. So it wasn't even that he was deferring to Mayer. I like him better at either third base or second base, so I think he'll get time at both positions this year. Average arm strength. It's a bunch of potentially average-ish tools. I'll be interested to see how he handles, again, Double-A is really going to be the proving ground for him. You know, if you look at his statistics from last year, in Greenville, he hit 288 with a 344 on base and a 500 slugging, 18 home runs, 10 triples. It's a good line. You know, he struck out 100 times, but, you know, 25% strikeout rate, or I think it was actually below that, I'm okay with, right? He had a very good year. I just want to see him repeat it at Double-A before I get too excited about him. So he's got a very important year this year, debuting, or not debuting, but getting his first real taste of Double-A ball. Yeah,
he's definitely an interesting one. You have this lefty at number 13, making his debut probably in mid-2023, Chris Murphy.
Murphy was added to the 40-man roster this offseason. Last year, he split time between Double-A Portland and Triple-A Worcester. In fact, he pitched 15 games at each level with exactly as many innings at each level. He really struggled in Worcester last year, but to some degree, it looked like he might have just been tired. He threw 150 innings last year, which was his career high. The year before, he had only pitched about 100. So you could understand if he got a little tired at the end. We think he probably looks a little bit better in the bullpen. You know, he's a lefty, which is always a good thing. But he's, you know, it's an average fastball, 90 to 93. He can get 96, but not often. Potential above average changeup, which is his best off-speed pitch. His curveball is a potential average pitch, and a below average slider. Again, I think getting a repeat taste of AAA this year will tell us a lot about his future, whether he's a guy who could potentially be a starting pitcher or not down the line. But even as a reliever, he might be one of these guys that, we mentioned Jeffrey Springs earlier, right? Maybe that's a kind of sort of multi-inning relief or, bulk reliever type role behind an opener or something might be a better role for him than being a true starter. Or maybe, he becomes a true reliever. We're going to learn a lot this year about what his role is, but he's very close to being able to make his debut. I mean, he got 75 innings in AAA last year.
Yeah.
The issue is just going to be opportunity because he's going to be in a rotation probably with Bryan Mata, Brandon Walter, Murphy, Josh Winkowski, maybe Cutter Crawford, maybe Victor Santos. So there's going to be a lot of guys at that AAA level. They just signed Jake Faria. I don't know if they're going to start him or relieve him.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they do with him. And it's just going to be a matter of when he gets a chance.
Okay. So before we enter the top 10, I saved two guys, which people from our community like a lot. So I was trying to push him back for them to watch more. Yep. Number 20, Nico Cavadas.
Nico Cavadas is interesting. He's fun to watch. He's this, big bodied guy. He was a player they drafted out of Notre Dame in 2021. They drafted him in the 11th round. So he was their first pick on day 3 of the draft, but they gave him an above slot bonus, even though he was a senior. He's older. He's 24, but he had a tremendous year last year in Salem and then in Greenville. He's got a really good approach. He does not chase pitches outside of the zone. He knows what pitches he's looking for up there. He's not going to expand to chase. His issue is going to be missing pitches in the zone. He's got a hole in his swing. With the way his bat path works, I think he's going to have some trouble potentially with velocity up in the zone. And I think Double-A kind of proved that. He really struggled at the Double-A level last year. He's going to get a second chance at it, obviously, this year. We've moved him up to 20th as a guy they drafted in the 11th round as a college senior. So that's good, right? But he's a first base only guy at best. He's not a great defender at first base. So there's a possibility he's a DH. That puts a lot of pressure on his bat. And so he's going to have to show that the hit tool will play at Double-A, and then he's going to have to prove it again at Triple-A. And he's going to have to prove it again in the majors. So he's got a bit of an uphill climb, but that said, he's got a good approach. There's nothing to suggest that he can't make adjustments. We just need to see him make those adjustments to be able to, catch up to velocity up in the zone, hit breaking pitches, in the zone, off speed, recognize spin. He won't expand the zone, but you got to hit the pitches that are in it and punish pitchers for throwing you strikes in the zone.
Can we expect to see him in Triple-A this season?
He'll go to Portland to start the year. He needs to hit better in Portland to get that promotion. It's certainly possible. I would not count it out. And one thing that we noticed in our projections, if you go to our website, we have our 2023 roster projections to start the year. We've got Bobby Dahlbeck as the starting first baseman in Worcester. And after that, he's the only real first baseman we have projected for that roster. So if if he certainly could have the opportunity to hit his way up to AAA, he just has to go do it.
Okay. And the other one that I was saving, number 17, Emmanuel Valdez.
Yeah, Valdez, as we mentioned, was the other guy they got from Houston in the Christian Vasquez deal. He had a really good year in AAA last year. After the trade in Worcester, only hit .237, but with a .313 on base and a .422 slugging.
A lot of power.
He maybe had a little less luck on balls in play than he did in AAA with Houston. He was hitting .296, .349 with a .560 slugging percentage. So he was hitting really well in the Pacific Coast League, which is more of a hitter's league than the International League where Worcester plays. One of his questions is going to be where he plays defensively. With Worcester, he played mostly second base. He also played some left field. He may have played a little bit of third base. So I think finding him a defensive home is going to be one of the things they focus on this year. but maybe he's a guy who comes up and, maybe isn't a starter, but gets 300 at bats, playing a mix of positions off the bench. And, he's going to come in and, as a lefty hitter off the bench, be able to put in a quality at bat. So we're interested to really get an up close look at him in spring training. Ian, our director of scouting, saw him a ton in Worcester. I haven't really seen him much up close yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing him in spring training.
His defense is not that exciting, right?
No, and that's the thing is, people will say, oh, well, he's versatile. He plays multiple positions. It's different than, look, Cedanne Rafaela plays multiple positions.
And he's great.
He plays multiple positions because he's a potential plus defender or better at multiple positions. Valdez played multiple positions because they're trying to find a place where he's going to be passable. So it's a very different situation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Top 10.
Sure.
There's this guy at top 10 who I haven't heard not a word from him. Luis Perales.
Luis Perales, yes. So he is a guy who the Red Sox signed out of Venezuela in 2019 for $75,000. So he didn't get a big bonus. In the DSL, and so after that, they signed him in 2019. 2020 is the COVID year where there was no minor league baseball. So a lot of the guys that kind of 2019 international class and draft class, they're kind of in this no man's land where they lost a very important year of development. So those guys are kind of known among the scouting community for being like the COVID year guys. In 2021, he only pitched in one game because of injuries to his arm. So he only pitched 2 innings, but the reports were very good on him, but we just didn't get to see him pitch much. Last year, mostly in the rookie ball league and the Florida Complex League. And then he made 4 appearances for Salem. He didn't pitch a lot. He never pitched more than 3 innings. He never came out for the 4th inning. That was on purpose. They were managing his workload. But that said, if you look at the numbers in the Florida Complex League, in 25 innings, he struck out 34 guys, only walked 9, ERA of 1.08. In Salem, he walked more guys. He walked 11 guys in 10 2/3 innings, but he probably has the best stuff of any pitcher in the system. He's really 95 to 98. He can touch 99. His curveball is also a potential plus pitch. It's nasty stuff, and he's got a changeup that's potentially above average. The key with him is we have no idea what he looks like pitching into the 5th inning or whether he can stay healthy. So that's the thing he's going to have to show. If he comes out early, I'll say this. If he goes to Salem and he comes out early and he is throwing 5 innings, pitching well, not, the numbers look great. The looks at him match that. He's a guy that could rise up our rankings very quickly. So
you're really hyping me up on him. You're really hyping me up.
Yeah, I think we're higher on him than anybody else is. I think Baseball America, for people who get their handbook, I think they have him at 17. Yeah, I don't. Keith Law didn't have him as 20. Yeah, I think Pipeline, actually hasn't updated their list for this year yet. Actually, so I think that's part of the reason why there might be some difference on our rankings. But I think we're going to be the highest on him just because we really like his upside. He's got as much upside as any pitcher they have.
What his
at least on our list. Sorry,
his best pitch.
It's either his fastball or his curveball. Probably the fastball. His fastball projects to be plus to better, but his curveball also might be a plus pitch. So he might have 2 plus pitches with a 3rd above average pitch, which is a great arsenal for a guy that young. He's still he was born in 2003, so he's going to turn 20 in April.
I think I found my new favorite prospect right here.
Let's move. Man, he's fun to watch.
Let's move on to number 9, Roman Anthony.
Sure. Roman Anthony was the guy I mentioned. He was their 3rd pick. He was a compensation pick in the 2nd round that they made last year. Florida high school guy. He's an outfielder. Another guy with great power, at least plus power. There was some question about his hit tool, but with the exit velocity metrics we've been able to get our hands on and things like chase rate and things like that, he actually looked really good in a small sample in rookie ball last year, and he actually got a chance to go up to Salem to end last year. So he'll be on if your listeners want to follow one minor league team next year, Salem might be the most exciting team to watch. It'll be between them and Greenville. Those are going to be two very fun teams to follow. But Anthony's a guy who might be able to stick in center field long term. Some scouts think he's better in an outfield corner. The Red Sox think he could potentially stick in center field. Average arm, but like I said, a ton of power, and the hit tool. If he's able to show even an average hit tool, he's a guy who could be really exciting to follow up the system after being drafted this past year.
Okay, number 8. This guy pretty interesting because I've seen, he had a great season, but also I read that people say that he doesn't really had that good stuff.
Okay.
What can you tell on the lefty Brandon Walter here?
Yeah, Walter was kind of a surprise. He was a guy they drafted out of the University of Delaware in the 26th round in 2019. Didn't do a whole lot in 2019 in his debut, lost the 2020 season actually, and he started 2021 in the bullpen in Salem. By the end of the year, he was a starter and he had moved up a level to Greenville, and he wound up starting 2022 in Double-A Portland. Now, he was old. He was 25 last year, so he's an older guy because remember, he was drafted as a senior and then lost a year. But really during that 2020 season, he came back a much different pitcher. His best pitches are his changeup and his slider. His slider is probably the best slider in the system. That they're both potentially plus pitches. We like his slider a little bit better. His fastball is about average. It's 90 to 93, topping out at 95. But he's a lefty, which is always good. And he's a guy who is a potential back-end starter. He has the stuff where he looks like he might be a starter. He might be more than that if it plays out because he also doesn't walk anybody. He does not. He's got excellent control, which also helps. This isn't a Darwin's and Hernandez great stuff, but no idea where it's going situation. But even if he winds up having to move to the bullpen, he could be a very good reliever from the left side. He has a low arm slot. It's kind of a Chris Sale arm slot where it's not quite sidearm. It's a low 3/4. And so he's a tough matchup, especially for lefties. He's a really, really, really tough on left-handed hitters. He missed a lot of last year with an injury that started as an injury to his neck, but it turned out to be a bulging disc. So he's going to have to prove this year coming back that he's 100% healthy. If he can prove he's healthy and goes back to pitching like he did when he was in Worcester last year, because, his first couple outings in Worcester weren't great, but you wonder how much of that was the disc issue.
Yeah, the injury.
So we'll have to see what he looks like healthy, but he also was added to the 40-man roster. He's a guy that I would expect we'll see at Fenway sometime this year, probably.
This year, yeah, because I can see here late 2023.
Yep, and that's going to depend on opportunity and how he's pitching too. It could be sooner, maybe not at all. Other guys pitch better.
Okay, number 7, Marcelo Mayer's best friend, Mikey Romero.
Yeah, that was kind of funny that they drafted him, and there's now video. I don't know if you've seen it of him calling Mayer, and them yelling at each other after he was drafted. Yeah, Romero was their first round pick, California high schooler. Was a surprise to a lot of people, but from what we've been able to hear from scouts and what we've seen in the data, really good hit tool. He might have a potential above average or maybe better hit tool. Really like him as a hitter, really like what we saw from him last year. I'm looking forward to what we see from him in his full season debut in Salem. Defensively, he'll probably split time between shortstop and second base. He's not a lock to stay at shortstop long term. So compared to Marcelo Mayer, who will stay at shortstop, he is a shortstop, no question.
Romero, I do see him more like a second base.
He may be a better fit at second base, but it's also not a situation like York was a shortstop in high school who it was clear was never going to play shortstop as a pro, right? Romero is somewhere between the two of them where he will continue to get time at shortstop. Maybe he improves there and he winds up a shortstop, right? Stranger things have happened, but he also might need to move to second base. But I'm excited to see him in his debut. He looks like he might be a guy. They've shown they're very good at identifying guys with good hit tools early in the draft, especially out of high school. And so we'll see if he's the latest in a line of guys that they've been good at identifying that with.
Okay. He'll be at Salem this year?
Yes, no question. That's where he'll start. And we'll see if he's on a similar development path to like Mayer last year, where maybe he gets a promotion during the season to Greenville if he's playing well in Salem.
Okay. So now there's this guy at number 6 who, if I had to put my money on one player making the majors this year, will be him, Bryan Mata.
Yeah, Mata, it seems like he's been around forever. They signed him in 2016 in January, which at the time was weird because that was still when July was the signing date. But he signed as an older guy because in July of 2015, he was supposed to sign with the Brewers, but he wound up with a groin injury and the Brewers pulled his deal. So the Red Sox swooped in and signed him for $25,000.
I didn't know that.
Considering what he's become. Yeah. Yeah. So Mata, he's interesting because it's premium stuff, right? He's 94 to 98 with the fastball. He can touch 100. It's a potential plus pitch, but there's a question of his command. He's got to throw strikes and he's got to throw quality strikes, and there's a question of whether he'll do that. He's got a really good slider that he added in Double-A. That is probably his best secondary now. He also throws a changeup and a curveball that he could potentially have 4 average pitches. With his issue is just going to be command and durability, because he came back from Tommy John surgery last year. He did stay healthy. He got up to Worcester last year. He threw, roughly 70, 80 innings last year. And he also, no, he didn't pitch in the Arizona Fall League. That was in 2019. His mechanics, he kind of short arms it. So there are some scouts who really don't love his mechanics and think he might be a better fit in the bullpen. But if he goes to the bullpen, there's a chance that he's a back end of the bullpen guy who's a setup guy, or maybe even potentially closer if all things worked out great. So
I read that
another guy who almost certainly we're going to see in Boston this year. He's on the 40-man roster. We'll see him up at some point, I think.
So will you say that he has a better chance than Walter to make the majors this year?
Potentially, and I'll say that just because Mata showed he was healthy last year, whereas Walter still has to show that he's now healthy after the disc issue.
Okay, I'll take that. Number 5, a guy who didn't have that great of a year, Nick York.
Yeah, York had a really disappointing season. I'm sure your listeners remember when he was drafted in 2020, was a really surprise pick for a lot of people. But I think what folks need to realize is that the Red Sox that year didn't have a second-round pick. They lost their second-round pick that year because of the sign stealing issue. So they didn't think that he was going to last until the 3rd round, which was the pick where they got Blaze Jordan, who we talked about earlier. So they took him in the 1st round because they really liked him, and they thought that he was the best player available with their pick. In 2021, he showed a terrific hit tool, was one of the breakout stars of the system. Last year, he had a really disappointing season in High A Greenville. That was in part due to injuries. He had multiple different injuries that he dealt with. He had turf toe for a while. He had back stiffness. Then he dealt with wrist soreness that came back in Arizona when he went to the Arizona Fall League. So it's tough to tell how much of his struggles were injury and how much of them weren't. So he's going to go back to Greenville to start the year, almost certainly, to try and show that, he's worked past it. He's made some changes to his swing. He used to start with kind of a normal sort of setup. And in Arizona video of him, he actually was starting with his hands really high, kind of above his head. And he actually, Alex Spear, I think, had a report recently that he went to Driveline out in Washington this offseason to work with them as well on refining his swing mechanics. So we'll see if all of this work he's putting in the offseason will help, offset some of the struggles he had this past year. But, the struggles are concerning, and that's why he fell to 5th on our rankings. But there's still a really good hit tool in there. And if he can get back to that, he could certainly rise back up in the rankings even. So it's going to be a big season for him.
Okay. So we should expect to see him at Portland sometime in the season, back in Portland, right?
Hopefully. So he finished last year in Greenville. I think the Red Sox would love it if he got to Portland mid-year.
Okay. Let's move on to number 4. One of the people's favorite, if not the big favorite, a guy that we're expecting to see 2023 in the majors, Cedanne Rafaela.
Yeah, Rafaela is fun to watch. That's he's easily the best defender in the system. He's the best defender that they've had in the system probably since Jose Iglesias, who I used to say that I would pay to watch Jose Iglesias take infield. I would probably pay to watch Cedanne Rafaela play center field, like just shagging batting practice. He makes a highlight reel play per week. He probably already plays close to Gold Glove caliber defense in center field, if not does already. The crazy thing is he's also probably a plus defender at shortstop. So he's got versatility. The problem, which is a great problem to have, is that he's so good in center field. There's no reason to play him anywhere else, right? Because he's so good there. He's got plus speed as well. He's fast and he can hit. He really can hit. He's got one major flaw to his game, and that is that he will chase pitches outside of the zone. Yeah. He had one of the highest chase rates in the entire farm system last year. And if you look at the guys who had chase rates close to him, it's all guys who struggled. And the thing with him is it doesn't show up. You would expect that to show up with strikeouts, right? But what happens with him is he chases, but he makes contact. It's just that it's poor contact. So his exit velocity rates wind up very low because he makes so much poor contact that it drags those numbers down. If he can improve his pitch selection and stop chasing so many pitches, he has the potential to be at least a major league regular with great defense. You know, think of maybe Jackie Bradley at his peak, potentially in terms of the value. But that said, there's also a lot of variance with the bat where maybe he just might not hit at all and he's more of a bench player who you can put in center field, can put at shortstop, and he'll play defense great, but you're going to hit him ninth and hope he hits 200. So there's some variance with the bat, but potential to be a potential special defender who you can play every day if the bat gets to maybe average.
Okay, so I like to do this with the bigger prospects. Give me like a floor and a ceiling for this guy, like a comparison with a major league player.
Ooh, I hate doing those comparisons because I hate giving people the wrong idea, right?
I love those comparisons.
Yeah, but it's so, like I said, low end, he's a major leaguer with his defense alone, right? He will have a spot on major league rosters just to be a defender, right? So maybe he's a guy who plays really good, maybe like Jackie Bradley now, where he can't really hit, but he'll play terrific defense for you, right? At the high end, you know, I don't know if he'll ever maybe hit like a Jim Edmonds, but he'll play terrific center field defense. If he hits, he's an all-star. You know, if he hits, I can't think of a Red Sox comp for him. Maybe like a Kevin Kiermaier, who might hit a little bit better. Might be a good comparison there. People will say visually, I hate to bring this up, visually at the plate, he looks a lot like Mookie Betts. he look like the stance is very similar. He's also 5'8", right? He's not tall. I just hate to say that because he is not Mookie Betts at the plate. He is not the same kind of hitter at all. But Rafaela, I didn't even mention he's got a plus arm. I mean, he'll throw a guy out from deep center field at third base. You know, he's got a terrific arm too. So yeah, like maybe a better hitting Kevin Kiermaier is the comp there. But I'm sure there's probably a better one somewhere that I just can't think of.
So you can count on him as a Gold Glover, but not a Silver Slugger.
Hey, that's a good way to put it. Potentially.
Okay, let's move on to probably my favorite prospect, thanks to you, because you've been hyping it a lot. Number 3, Miguel Bleis.
Miguel Bleis probably has the highest ceiling of any player in the farm system, even including Marcelo Mayer. The reason we have Mayer rated higher than him, even though they're both in the low minors, is that Mayer has a much higher floor.
Safer floor.
Safer, yes, 100%. Bleis is a potential 5-tool player. He's a terrific defender in center field, takes good routes, plus speed, above average arm. He'll show plus raw power in batting practice. He has exit velocity numbers that rival those of guys that they have in AA, AAA, where exit velocity and power tend to correlate really well with age. Power develops as you get older, you get stronger. He already puts up exit velocity numbers that compare with guys in AA and AAA, power hitting guys in AA and AAA. It's very encouraging. The thing he has to work on, and the thing that we're not ignoring it, but you can live with it because he was 18 last year. He turns 19 in March. So his birthday's coming up in less than a month. Is the off-speed pitches and breaking balls really gave him some trouble last year in the Florida Complex League. So that's something he needs to work on. That's a development point for him. But that said, he's got plenty of time to work on it. Like I said, he's still just 19, right? He's still going to be 19 all season, and he's going to be in Salem. We're really high on him. We love him. I love watching him play. I can't wait to see him again in spring training. He would have gone up to Salem for the last couple of weeks this past year, but he had a back injury, so they just decided to play it safe and shut him down. But he's a guy who, if he goes to Salem and plays to his potential, I would not be surprised to see him. He's a top 100 prospect now this offseason. It would not surprise me to see him as a top 50, top 25, maybe even guy this time next year in a best case scenario. He'll probably spend most of the season in Salem just because of his age, but he could also get to high A by the end of the year as a 19-year-old, which is kind of incredible for an international guy.
Okay, so speaking on that, on the top 100, let's go a little bit back to Rafaela. Do you see him as a top 100 prospect?
So let me say this. When I judge this with Red Sox guys, it's more by feel, right? Because I don't have my own top 100 list. I do not claim to have enough knowledge to put together my own top 100 list. I couldn't, right? And I have a lot of respect for the publications that do. Rafaela feels to me like maybe just outside of the top 100, maybe sneaking into the back end of a top 100 guy. And that's mostly where he's been. I think Kylie McDaniel at ESPN didn't rank him in his top 100, but he was like an honorable mention. Baseball America and MLB Pipeline, I think, had him in like the 80 to 90 range. But then like Keith Law had him at 37, which I thought was crazy.
Crazy.
Look, that's his opinion on him. And if that's your opinion on him, put him there. Like, more power to you. Like, I'm not saying, that there's nothing wrong with that if that's where you think he goes. I just have questions about how the hit tool will play up. And if he answers those questions, then yeah, maybe he winds up that high, if he hits this year and doesn't graduate. But I need to see him do more at the plate first, I think, before I put him higher. Okay.
So let's go back in the top. Let's go to number 2. 2023's Rookie of the Year, Triston Casas.
El Coloso is his nickname. Triston Casas, the first thing you notice about him is he is huge. He's listed at 6'5", 250. He's a big boy. He's not out of shape. He's actually in pretty good shape for that size, but he's just a big human, is the way to put it. First base only guy, but he's going to be interesting. He's going to get the job out of camp this year in first base. They showed that by releasing Eric Hosmer, a guy that they're going to give a shot to. Yeah, he's first base only. Let's start on the defense because I'll save the best for last. He can play really good defense at first base, and it's actually too bad because he's got a pretty strong arm. He was also in the low 90s as a pitcher in high school. It's just that he was drafted as a third baseman. He didn't look natural over there. It was kind of like Jordan. Like Bambi, when you see like a young deer trying to walk, there's just limbs everywhere. It just didn't look, but he can actually field first base pretty well. At the plate, at least plus, if not plus raw power. He can hit the ball a ton, and he's a smart hitter. He's got the potential where he could potentially be an above average hit tool guy. And so part of his development and what I'm interested in watching him this year and maybe into next year is what kind of hitter he becomes. Does he become a guy who hits 250 with 30 home runs? Or does he try to be a guy who hits 280 with 25 home runs? Right? Like, what type of hitter is he going to become? Is he going to sell out for more power? Or is he going to try and rein it back in to maybe hit for a higher average?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of hitter he becomes. I'm not guaranteeing he becomes one of those things, but that's in there. The comparison you hear for him a lot is Freddie Freeman. And the type of hitter he could be.
The OBP looks like a given. Like, it looks like a guaranteed good OBP guy.
Yeah, I mean, like with Boston last year, right? In a very small sample size, he only hit 197, but he had a 358 on base, right? And in Worcester last year, he hit 273 with a 382 on base and a 481 slugging. If anything, looking at his stats, the weird thing is he hasn't hit for that much power. This isn't a situation like where when Bobby Dahlbeck was coming up, he was hitting a ton of home runs, right? That hasn't been the Triston Casas experience. I think he's going to hit for power. I mean, look, he's going to be 23 this year. He turns 23 in January. So he just turned 23 last month. He's still young. He's still learning to hit. He's still growing into his power, learning how to get to it. I think he's going to hit for power. I think he's going to be a potential middle of the order hitter. It's just, does he turn into a like number 3, number 4 hitter, or more of a like number 5, number 6 hitter? We'll see how he develops this year. I'm really excited to see him at the major league level this year and seeing what he does in Fenway.
Okay, and about the nickname El Coloso, who gave it to him?
I don't know. I only heard that for the first time because he was supposed to play, and this is the other thing with him is staying healthy. He was supposed to play for Los Tigres del Licey in Lidom this offseason, but he only played 3 games, and then he had a knee injury, and they just played it safe and shut him down and brought him back to the U.S. and he didn't finish the season with Licey, which is too bad because they won the league, I think. And they're
in the Caribbean Series. They won the semifinal against Mexico.
Oh, did they? Okay. Well, It's funny because tangent. I have a neighbor who's a Licey fan, and I learned this because at Halloween last year, he was like walking around our neighborhood in a Licey cap and jersey, and I gringo over here recognized the Licey cap and jersey, and he was just like, "How do you know Licey?" I was just like, I went into the whole thing of why I know, but it's a fitting name. I mean, he's huge. He's a colossus.
Yes. Okay, so to wrap it up with the crown jewel,
Marcelo
from Mexico, actually. So we're kind of proud of him. We actually got the opportunity already to talk to him. We have like a 30-minute interview with him. Marcelo Mayer.
Marcelo Mayer, yeah. I mean, he was drafted out of high school in California, but yeah, like you said, Mexican. He was actually on the like preliminary roster for Mexico for the World Baseball Classic. Obviously, he didn't wind up on the roster, which was not surprising. There's not a lot of A-ball guys who play in the World Baseball Classic. But another guy who there's really not a flaw in his game. And that's why he's a top 20 prospect in the game right now, if not higher. I mean, he was top 10 in...
He's 9, I think.
Yeah, in MLB's list, he was 9, yes. Sorry if you hear the cat screaming in the background.
I didn't.
So anyway, a potential to have above average tools across the board, except for maybe his speed. But he's a potential plus defender at shortstop. He's got a plus arm. Potential for maybe above average or better power, potential above average or plus hit tool. He's a really exciting player, and he just looks the part out there. You go to see a game where he's playing, and he just looks the part. You just see him move out in the field. You see his motion, his movements at the plate, his hit mechanics. He looks the part. He looks like a guy that's a future major leaguer. And with him, it's just making sure the development goes appropriately. And just seeing what he could do on the field. He did have an ankle injury last year that cost him a wrist sprain, not an ankle. And the ankle was someone else. The ankle was Casas. That was the thing I forgot. Casas had an ankle injury last year. So he's got to show that he can stay healthy between that and the knee injury. But with Mayer, he had a wrist injury in April, May. That kind of cost him some time, and he needs to show that he can stay healthy. And just because he hasn't had the opportunity, last year was his first year. It could be a one-time thing. So he'll start in Greenville. I don't think he's going to be there very long. I think he's going to move quickly. I think the Red Sox are going to be tempted to move him really fast.
Yeah.
But that said, they've shown that they are willing to be patient with guys. It's not a situation where they're going to promote guys from AA. I could see him in Portland by May or June if everything goes well in Greenville this year. I don't think he's going to take long to get to Portland. It's not out of the question he gets to AAA by the end of the year if he plays to his potential. I'm really excited about him. I'm excited to see him in camp this year because last year in camp, I didn't see him at all because there was one day where he was on the road and I was at JetBlue Park in Fort Myers. There was one day where he was up with the major league team for the major league game.
Yeah.
There was one day where he didn't play in the games because they had some minor leaguers come up to face Nathan Eovaldi in a bullpen. And then there was an off day. So I didn't see him at all. Then sure enough, I go to a Salem game in August in Delmarva because I live in Washington, D.C. And it's the only game all month he was hurt. I saw a doubleheader and he was hurt. He didn't play, or he played the first game, but he looked terrible and he came out and it turned out he had a back spasm or something. So I'm looking forward to actually seeing the dude play in person this year. I want to see it, man. This is why I do this, is to see guys like Marcelo Mayer in the minors. But that said, anyway, it really wouldn't surprise me if we saw him in the majors in 2024. If everything goes well, he's got the potential, he's got the talent, he's got the tools where he might not need very long in the minor leagues before he comes up. And so, look, I don't think, it kind of begs the question of, well, is that why they didn't try to sign Xander Bogaerts? I don't think it is at all.
No, I don't.
I think they wanted to re-sign him. And look, if you have a problem where you have an all-star shortstop and a potential all-star shortstop in the minors, great. I don't think any of us thought that Xander Bogaerts was going to play shortstop for 10 more years, right?
No.
So maybe you move Bogaerts to second, maybe you move him to left. I don't know. They would have made it work. But that said, I think the coast is clear for Mayer to come up.
Definitely.
Potentially end of next year and maybe full-time 2025 at some point.
Yeah, I believe that too. Okay, so we finished the top 30. Give me three guys with the most possibilities to make their debut on this year.
This year, they've got a lot of guys. Honestly, I think we hit on some of them. It's kind of funny if you look at our 2023 projected rosters. I mentioned Salem and Greenville are probably going to be the most prospect heavy, but they have a lot of guys in AAA. I think Bryan Mata is going to make his debut. In what role, I don't know. He might get a spot start or two. He might wind up getting some time in the bullpen if they, say down the stretch, they want to add to the bullpen. That's a move you could make, is move Bryan Mata to the bullpen for the stretch run rather than trading for someone. I think that'll be very interesting to see how they handle him late in the year. It would not surprise me, like we mentioned, to see Brandon Walter or Chris Murphy debut on the pitching side. And then I'll give you more than three. On the offensive side, I think Cedanne Rafaela will come up at some point if he hits well in AAA. I think you could see Manuel Valdez make his debut. And even later in the year, David Hamilton's on the 40-man roster. He could come up. Hamilton could be that guy. Say the Red Sox make the playoffs, right? Hamilton's a guy who could come up to fill that, bench, go steal a base, Dave Roberts role.
Yeah, definitely.
So I could definitely see Hamilton making a debut, especially if speed becomes important in the major leagues this year.
Okay, then three prospects, three underrated prospect that we should be paying attention to.
I don't know about underrated, but let me give you this. Guys who maybe are a little under the radar, because it's we think we've got them rated appropriately, right? But guys that people may not be as familiar with, there are a couple names that come to mind. One is a pitcher from Puerto Rico, Elmer Rodriguez Cruz, who last year was in the Florida Complex League, and he'll be in Salem in a rotation that'll be really fun with Perales as well. Rodriguez Cruz is interesting. He was a fourth rounder in 2021. Kind of wasn't on anybody's radar, but he really impressed in the Florida Complex League last year. A very tall, lanky guy. So I'm interested to see, as he kind of fills out, does he maybe add some velocity? He's a guy that I think is really interesting that isn't on a lot of radars yet. And another guy we didn't mention, Edinson Paulino, who's going to be in Greenville this year. He's an infielder. He also played a little bit of outfield last year. I like him as a potential utility guy in the majors. I could see him in Double-A mid-season, and a guy who maybe could be knocking on the door by mid-next year.
Okay. I was hoping you name Gilberto Jimenez.
Gilberto. Jimenez is a guy who we used to have. I think he got as high as like third on our rankings. Okay. And we currently have him ranked 39th in the system. The problem with him, he looks like if Jimenez were from the United States and not the Dominican, he would have probably played football. He looks like a running back or a linebacker. He's extremely athletic. He used to be a true 80 speed runner. Now he's down to about just a 70 runner. Problem with him is he just does not hit the ball hard. It's like Juan Pierre, if anybody remembers Juan Pierre, where it's just slap the ball and put it in play. And it really limits his ceiling. And then the other thing is that despite his speed, he's not a great defender. He looks like he's a corner outfield only guy, maybe only left field, despite being really fast and despite having a really strong arm. It's been kind of one of the more disappointing trajectories in the past couple of years. Maybe it can come back, but that's why it's just, before it was, well, he's got time to work on his swing and hit for more power. But the thing is, he's running out of time to do that. He was in high A last year. I don't know if he's going to repeat the level or get promoted to Double-A. He might get pushed to Double-A just because he kind of has to. It wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't even necessarily getting everyday playing time, but I think they're going to try and get as much out of him as they can. There's a ton of potential there. But he really was probably one of the more disappointing guys last year in terms of the fact that he didn't develop that much.
Okay, well, that's kind of sad to hear.
Well, it happened. That's part of. There's guys like that every year. Guys move up, guys move down, and it's part of the fun of it. It's never fun to see guys go in that direction, but it's certainly part of what happens.
Okay, so if you got time, because I feel like I've had you here forever.
Maybe one or two more questions, and then we can maybe wrap it up. But I've got a little.
Yeah. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the international signings.
Sure. So this year's class, you mean? Yeah. So it's always kind of tough with the international guys, especially when you're talking about the Red Sox, because they're very good at finding prospects who don't get a huge bonus, but turn into a lot more. Off the top of my head, Bryan Mata, Darwinson Hernandez, Luis Perales didn't get a lot of money. Gilberto Jimenez, as a guy who for a while looked like a top prospect, did not get a lot of money. They're very good at finding guys who don't get big bonuses and turn out to be really good players. So it's tough to judge before these guys come over to the States and we can see them, because even in the Dominican Summer League, it's tough to judge them because it's basically high school baseball in the Dominican, right?
Yeah.
That said, so this year's class is headlined by a shortstop. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Joelyn Cespedes. Cespedes, sorry. I don't know why. I know how to pronounce that one because of Yoenis, who, by the way, he's not related to Yoenis Cespedes.
Yeah.
No, they have extremely similar names. So, it's kind of funny. But he's a shortstop. He's highly regarded. He was a top 30 guy in the international class through the, in terms of his bonus that he got. He got, like I said, 1.4 million. He's a shortstop. He may need to move to second or third. Average arm, average speed, good makeup, quick wrists, good swing, above average raw power. He's going to be the headliner. It's tough to say with this year's class until we really get more data on them, just because I tend to just really disregard a lot until we see guys get in. Last year's class, even if I can maybe expand to that, it was really interesting. They've got some guys who I'm very interested in seeing in camp this year. A shortstop by the name of Marvin Alcantara from Venezuela, who only got 30,000. Another guy who didn't get a big bonus, might have been their best player in the Dominican last year, as well as a probably going to be more of a third baseman named Frilly Encarnacion.
Yeah.
Another Dominican signing. Those are the two top stateside this year that I'm really interested in seeing. But it looked like last year's class had a lot of really interesting guys. And that's one of the things I'm going to have my eye on in camp this year, the guys who are in the US, to see what look like they might pop.
Fraley got a big bonus, right?
Fraley got 1.1 million.
Yeah.
$1 million bonuses in last year's class.
Yeah, I remember that one. Okay, so that will be it. I don't know if you want to share something with our audience.
I don't know. Well, first off, thank you for having me on. This was very fun. Thank you to you. Thank you to your listeners for listening. You can check us out at SoxProspects.com. We've got scouting reports on every player in English. So hopefully for everyone out there, hopefully that's not an issue. But yeah, we've got, projected rosters right now. We've got our rankings. Of course, we rank out to 60 and we update every month. We've got a news page where we have our daily recap of games and we'll put scouting stuff on there sometimes too. And of course, we've got our podcast. So once you're done listening to this one, if you want to go check us out, it's the Sox Prospects podcast. You can also find links to it on our website as well. And on my Twitter as well, which I guess I should say I'm at SP Chris Hatfield on Twitter. And you can follow the site at SoxProspects. Again, both of those, the site one is linked on the website as well. But, we've got a lot of good, interesting resources on there, lists of when guys are eligible for the Rule 5 draft, draft history pages, international signing history pages, things like that. So I think we've got a lot of cool stuff on there. And, folks can always reach out to me on Twitter. I try to respond to most questions there. And for our podcast, we always take email questions. So if folks want to hear us talk about something on our podcast, they should send an email. It's podcast@SoxProspects.com. So, we're happy to answer. No question, no such thing as a dumb question. If it's something people want to know and want to hear about, we want to talk about it. So
we'll put all the links in the description and try to put it on social media as well. Man, it was great having you. It was real fun. I hope we can do this again next year after we test all these guys in Portland.
Sure.
Yeah, and talk again because, I could talk baseball like for hours and hours for real.
Yeah, man. Well, if you're ever in DC, let me know. We'll, go out and talk over a couple of beers or something.
All right. I'll take you that, okay? Okay,
sounds
amigos.
Good.
Ahí quedó el episodio de Prospectos con Chris Hatfield, uno de los conocedores más grandes de los prospectos de los Red Sox. Espero que les haya gustado. Vayan a seguir a todos los links que les pusimos por ahí. Si no le han dado like al video, denle. Si quieren preguntar algo, pónganlo en los comentarios. Suscríbanse al canal. Fue un esfuerzo medio grande hacer este episodio en inglés y los subtítulos. Ya me estoy muriendo de todo lo que voy a tener que escribir. Pero pues sí, lo hicimos por ustedes porque sabíamos que les iba a gustar. Así que ahí nos vemos. A ver.